This is the tutorial video for Mobile VR Movement Pack version 1.3. And the way the tutorial videos are now, the whole entire tutorial is going into one video. And if you want to jump to the different sections, just click right down here and you can jump between the different sections of the tutorial. First part is the intro. Let's look at that and how to use it. If you want to add the script called editor mouse look to the main camera, that lets you rotate the camera with Alt and tilt it with Control while you're in the Unity editor. And then make sure you set up your tags for the main camera and the player, and make sure the main camera is a child of another game object. And then before we get into each example, we need to import the pack. So let's go ahead and import the asset. We have 8 assets on the asset store. So all of our assets are going into a folder called In Your Face, and then the asset is a subfolder of that. So here we have the VR movement pack, and you'll notice that there's also another folder that comes in each one of the packs, and that's called Demo Assets. Demo Assets comes with stuff like animations, materials, models, scripts, shaders, terrain, textures. And these really are all stuff that can be shared between the different assets, between our movement pack or our VR interaction pack. So that's why it's in a separate folder, so that it can be shared with the other packs. However, there's another folder in each pack called Demo, and that is the scene files. And the reason why it's a subfolder of this is because each pack is going to have scenes that are specific to that pack. So here in the movement pack, we have a bunch of movement scenes. And in the interaction pack, we're going to have a bunch of interaction scenes. But the materials and stuff like that are shared assets between those two different demo scenes. So if you don't want to use the demos at all and you just want to use the interaction pack, or the movement pack, you would deselect the demo assets and the demo folder to get the scene and the scene's assets that it needs. And this is essentially the movement pack. But I'm gonna look at the movement. I want to look at the demo scenes, so we're gonna import those. So the first one in the documentation here is auto walk. So let me go ahead and open up the demo folder, and then I'm gonna go to demo auto walk. And auto walk is just an example of how to walk when you click to walk and then click to stop. So the click is the button on the cardboard device or the tap on the touchpad for the Gear VR, and that just lets you stop or start walking. There's a prefab for that called player auto walk, so you could find basically every player that we're going to be looking at has a prefab to match it. So for the demo, when you see on the player auto walk, it has the NVR auto walk script, and each one of the scripts has a prefix NVR, and that's just for in your face VR script. That way you know, for one, you can easily find them all by just typing in VR, and it kind of lets you know that that's a script that comes with this pack. So if we look at that script, we open it up. I'm not going to go through each script in this video because each line of the script has a comment, and it's really easy and simple to see how things are working here. So that's the auto walk. The one variable you have control over here is speed. So you can modify the speed there. The next one is the advanced walk, and it's really similar, except it has a look to jump. And what that means is when you look up in VR like this, it'll do a jump. And you could remap that to like a Bluetooth controller button, but I wanted a gaze only solution for jumping, and so I used looking up for that. And then there's also an interactive object that does not allow the player to move while you're looking at that object. And that would be like a UI where you need to click on a button or an object in the world that you need to interact with and click on it. So let's look at the advanced walk. Very similar. You just click to walk, click to stop. But if you're looking at this object, you won't move at all. The click won't do anything. That way, if it was, like I said, a UI element, you could put buttons here and you could click on them without allowing the player to start moving. Now, if you look away and you click, the player's going to move. And like we've seen, if you look up, you jump. So the advanced walk is actually using gravity. If you need a player to like walk downstairs, or do that, you could use simple walk, the simple example. But this one has more control over gravity and whatnot. So let's look at the script. And again, this has a prefab, but it just uses the NVR advanced walk script. You have a speed variable, allowed to move, and the allowed to move variable just allows the player to move by clicking. Now, if I look at this object, you're going to see it gets toggled off. And that's how we're preventing the player from moving when they look at an object. So if I toggle that off, the click doesn't do anything at all. And then jump enabled, of course, that just lets the player jump. If I turn it off, looking up won't make the player jump. There's the jump speed, and that's how fast he jumps, but really that means how high the player's going to jump, because if you turn that up, the player's going to go really high. So that's a lot of speed being applied to the character controller. And then the jump toggle, minimum angle and maximum angle, is the areas where the jump is toggled. So if you want to wait till it's, practically straight up, you would actually decrease this value to something like 270 to 300. And now you'll see if I look up, it's not going to jump. It still hasn't jumped, and I can see that. So there we go. So I almost had to look straight up in order to toggle the jump. So this is the angle at which that jump is going to get triggered. Which angle, as far as the angle that I'm moving my head, what angle is going to trigger that jump. Let's go to the next demo. That is AutoFly. AutoFly is demo AutoFly. It's the same exact thing as AutoWalk, except you fly. So you're not stuck on the ground. Wherever you look, including up or down, you go in that direction. So this would be good for outer space or underwater, maybe anything that doesn't have gravity. And the only variable on the AutoFly is the speed. Okay, the next one is Look Walk. And Look Walk, when you're looking around, you don't, the player's not moving. However, if you look down, the player is always going to be walking. And then when I look back up, he's going to stop walking. So that's Look Walk, and the options here is the toggle angle, and that is just like at which angle when I'm looking down is it going to trigger that. So if I move this up to like 50, if I just look down a little bit, it's going to I'm going to have to look way down to trigger that movement. There we go. I could see I'm moving a little bit. Eventually I'll get to that. There it is. There's the line. And then if I wanted it to be, if I put it down to like 10, then if I barely look down, it's going to start walking. So toggle angle and speed. And again, all these scripts are commented really well. If you want to switch it so that the player's walking when you look forward and he stops walking when you look down, then you could just reverse these true and false. And now you're going to see I'm always going to be walking, except when I look down, I'll stop walking. But by default, it's set up the other way. All right, the next one is the Navmesh movement. And now we're getting into a little bit more complicated scenes. So let's go to the demo scene, and we got the Navmesh. So I'm going to have to go to Window, Navigation, and that opens up the navigation window. I'm not going to get into a tutorial on Navmesh here. There's lots of resources from Unity. I even have tutorials on Navmesh. But I've already baked the navigation mesh, so you can see it's already based on all my values I've set. It's baked the nav mesh. These are all obviously navigation targets, and it's using a slope so that I can't go up slopes that are too steep. And then all the nav mesh does is whenever you push a button, it shoots a ray straight forward, and wherever it hits, it'll move the player to that spot. So let's take a look at how this works real quick. If I just, wherever I'm looking, it's going to be, in the middle of the screen about here. It's going to shoot a ray, and it's going to move me to the point that I was looking at. Now, on something like this, you can see the ray, it's drawn by a red line. So if I try to walk, for example, to the top of this mountain up here, you can see all my clicks I did. And it tried to go here, but you're going to see on the navigation mesh, it can't go up there because of the slope, so it just went as close as it could. So this is the nav mesh example, and how it works is the player has the nav mesh agent on it, but you put a script onto the terrain. Now the terrain has a script called NVR walkable surface, and that just allows the player to walk on the surface. It allows the raycast to hit it and move the player to that location. So because I want the player to walk on this green grass area down here, it needs the NVR walkable surface. And I want the player to walk on the terrain, so it also needs that NVR walkable surface. And again, if we look at the script, NVR walkable surface, well commented, but when you do a pointer down or when you click on the button, it does a raycast, and it moves the nav mesh agent to the position that the raycast hit. The next sample is the Bluetooth controller, and there's not going to be a lot to look at as far as here in this video, because if we open up the Bluetooth controller, we can control it with WASD or the arrow keys. And most Bluetooth controllers, not all of them, but most of them are going to respond in the same manner to the horizontal and vertical input axis. So this is not a complicated script, and this is not a all-inclusive solution for Bluetooth controllers and VR. It's just a simple example that should work with most Bluetooth controllers, and it moves the player based on the input axis, vertical and horizontal. And you can control speed on that. And again, you can test that in the editor with WASD or the arrow keys, and turn by holding Alt. We wouldn't want to turn the player's head with the VR controller, with the Bluetooth controller, because I should be turning my head with my neck. Alright, the next one is the Waypoint system, and this is definitely the most complicated sample that we have. And in the Waypoint system, if I go to the demo folder and open up Waypoints, you're going to see there's just one waypoint. And if I look at that waypoint, it's going to animate, and I'm going to move to it. Now, the reason why there's not any more waypoints in the demo scene is because I allowed you to try adding waypoints yourself. It's really easy. All you have to do is click Add Connected Waypoint. That's going to add a new game object, and now I can move it. The green line shows which waypoints are connected to each other. So because these two are connected to each other, it shows the green line. Now I'm going to add another new one. And so we can see that only these two waypoints are connected. So I can't travel from this one to this one. I have to travel from this to this to this. Now I could add this one by, say, add a connected waypoint and dragging this first one that I had into the box. Now you could see that from this waypoint I can travel to this one or this one. So let's go back to this waypoint and say, let me travel all the way, whoops, add a new one, and let me go to the waypoint town 001. There we go. So now I can travel from this one to this one, or from this one to this one. And from the middle one, I could travel to this one or this one. So you can set the waypoints up however you want. Let me look at the option here. We got the gaze timer, how long you look at the waypoint before you move to it in seconds. The player speed, this is how fast the player moves while he's going in between the waypoints. The offset. The offset is a vector 3. You might not want to move the player right to the middle. So for example, on these waypoints, the middle of the waypoint is right here. I actually want to move the player to an offset of 1 above it. And the reason why is because the player is at a height of 2. So the camera is 2 meters high. That's about how high a human is. And the waypoint is at a height of 1. So if this didn't have an offset, the player essentially would go into the center position of that waypoint. And now if we look at the player himself, he's at a height of 1, which is at his waist, essentially, is at the ground. So because my waypoint is at a height of 1, I'm going to put a player offset of 1. That way the player always is at a height of 2. And so you may want to adjust the for different waypoints, you might have a slightly different height. That's the offset value. Now we have the connected waypoints. We already looked at adding them. We could delete them. We can move them, reorder them. And then there's the add connected waypoint and the waypoint prefix. The waypoint prefix, you see right here, it's town. And the 2 that I added got a town and then a number added automatically. So this was the town 000, and then the next one was town 001. Now say I had a path that was going out to the beach. Then I could say add a new waypoint, but I want the prefix to be beach. Then I say add connected waypoint. Now this one got a name of beach 0000, and that just helps you name your objects and give them a number, which is kind of the order it is in its path. So this is the first waypoint, and then we have the path that's going into the town. And we have the path that's going into the beach. And that is how the waypoint system works. If you want to look at the waypoint scripts, you'll have to go to the scripts folder and look at the NVR waypoint script. Again, it's all well commented. But because this one has a custom editor script and data class, it gets pretty complicated. And so it uses this data class, which is only a game object. And then it also uses a editor script. Whoops. The NVR Waypoint editor. It ends up using an data drawer for the data class. And it uses the NVR Waypoint list. So all of that together makes this work. For example, this is the NVR Waypoint list script. So this script is doing this. And then the editor script is doing this whole editor window. And the data drawer is holding information about the waypoint, which right now it's only a game object, but depending on your game, you may want to add more information to the data than just a game object. You could add whatever you want. Originally, I had a string in here for a name, but I ended up just using the name of the game object instead. So you could expand depending on your game. You might want to do more stuff with that data class. Now, that should pretty much cover the waypoint system. The animation explains how the animation is working. So if you look at the waypoint, essentially this is the visual component, the child. So whatever, if you want to change the arrow, you would just add a different child, add a different mesh down here. And if you want to animate it when you look at it, you just have to include an animator and then add this waypoint animation controller. Animation controller. And if you look at your animator window, you'll see that there's a parameter for pointer inner, which is a Boolean. And that's true when the player is looking at the waypoint. So when the player is looking at the waypoint, the arrow goes into this up-down animation. And if the player's not looking at it, it goes into the spin animation. So this is not looking at the waypoint, and then this is the animation that plays when you are looking at the waypoint. We already looked at the scripts that are being used, and then in this version 1.3 I added a new demo scene called Demo Waypoints Auto. And this one actually has a little ring of waypoints set up. The connected waypoint really doesn't do anything in this case. Really all the benefit here is that you can easily make your path with the add connected waypoint. But if you look at the player, he has a script called NVR Waypoint Auto Move, and that has this array of waypoints. And whatever you put into this list, it's just going to automatically loop in between those transforms. So if I hit start, it's automatically going to move between the waypoints, and they don't have to be waypoints. This script, these could just be transforms. So a game object with nothing on it. And it's just going to move me in a loop around those. Now really this is powered by iTween. So if you want more information, look at their documentation or their example pack. Here's the iTween documentation. And then here's the iTween example pack. So let's go to the next. Let's keep going down. Target platforms. The first one is Gear VR, and this is already going to work for Gear VR. If you just say File, Build Settings, and your target platform is Android, and then you go into the player settings, and you select Virtual Reality Supported. It has that Oculus SDK. This is going to work for Gear VR. And then if you're building for the Google VR, let's look at importing into the Google VR SDK. And that's the last part of this tutorial. So I'm using Unity 5.5.1. The documentation file covers how to do this for Google VR 1.03. Now I have videos on this channel on how to do the Google VR 1.03. I got videos on how to do the Google VR 1.20. So check out those videos. And because the documentation shows how to do the 103, I thought I would do the tutorial video with the 120 because it's really the same steps. It's just different script names. So let me import the Google VR SDK version 1.20. So I imported the Unity package from the GitHub repository download, and this is version 1.20. I'm not building for iOS or 32-bit, so I'm just going to deselect those two folders. And because I'm not using Unity 5.6, which has native Google VR, I need to import the additional package, and then you need to click again because you won't see this window until you click again. This is the GVR backwards compatibility package, Unity package, with the these files for the plugins folder. Import those, and again, that's just importing this Unity package right here because we're not using Unity 5.6 or a native Unity VR version. So going into the documentation for how to do this, import the Google VR SDK, import the mobile VR movement pack, open up one of the scenes, add the GVR viewer main prefab, which comes from the Google VR prefabs folder, and here it is. Add this to the scene, and then this is optional. You can remove the editor mouse look script from the main camera. So if I go to the main camera, it has the editor mouse look script. I could remove this because Google VR lets you rotate with Alt and Control and tilt with Control. So you don't need it. And then the next step is to add the GVR dot prefab to the main camera. So if you go to the UI folder, there's a GVR dot pointer. I'm going to add that to the main camera. Remove the simple gaze input module from the event system. There's actually not an event system in this demo scene, so I'm just going to add one UI event system. And then you need to add the gaze input module, not this NVR simple gaze input module, the gaze input module. That's the one from Google VR. And it's actually telling me that that's depreciated. That's right, because that's for the version 1.03. What they actually have here is the GVR event system, so I'm going to delete the event system, and I'm going to bring in the GVR event system prefab, because that has the event system plus the GVR pointer manager plus the GVR pointer input module. And then the next step is to add the Google VR gaze input module. We just did that. Move the gaze input module up. We don't have to do that because we're using this prefab from 1.20. And then we have the Google VR added. Now I should have done that in a scene that needs gaze input. For example, let's see, if I go to the waypoints, this one could use it so that I know when I'm looking at this arrow. So to go through that again super fast, I'm just going to add go to the prefabs folder, add the GVR viewer main, and then we need to go to the main camera, and we can, if we want to, take that script away, but we don't have to. And then I'm going to go to the Google VR prefabs UI folder, add the dot pointer prefab to the main camera. I'm going to delete this event system, and I'm going to add the GVR event system. Now we get the Google VR camera, and when we look at the arrow, we can see we're interacting with it, and we move right to it. So that's how to integrate with the Google VR SDK, and that brings us to the end of the documentation. So I hope this video has helped you out, and check out our other assets that we have on the asset store for VR development. And remember to give this video a like, and I'll see you guys in the next video.